Well, Jim, let's move on from the sad news of the passing of Bushwhacker Butch to talk about someone else who everyone's been asking about. Let's hear some audio of Vince McMahon on CNBC with Ari Emanuel, interviewed by Scott Wapner, the son of Judge Wapner from the People's Court. And have you seen the footage of this, or how much? I know you've seen the image.
I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but I've seen some clips. And yes, again, the appearance of well, I tweeted since the last time, since we started this program, I've tweeted when we took our break, he looks like late stage Wayne Newton. Put that visual in your head for a second. Is he going to be seating people at a casino pretty soon in Vegas?
Do you think he does that on his own, or someone talks him into it?
I don't know what he's thinking, and somebody just sent me an email that had a picture of him from a year ago where he had gray in his hair, and he had, you could barely kind of see his eyebrows because they were gray, but he had normal looking eyebrows. And yes, his face was melting, but he's almost 80. And then they transposed it side by side with the jet black hair and like I said, the Wayne Newton fucking eyebrows and mustache. And I don't know what he's thinking.
Well, let's hear some audio. Here is Vince McMahon with Ari Emanuel, the head of Endeavor, on CNBC with Scott Wapner.
I mean, Ari, Endeavor was mentioned throughout this entire process.
Yep.
And now you're the last person standing. Why the WWE?
He decided not to body slam me. But, we've brought together in a pure play the UFC and the WWE into a new publicly traded company. It's very rare to get iconic brands like the UFC and the WWE together. Individually, they're incredible assets. Together with the flywheel of Endeavor, which we've built, I think makes them unicorns.
Let me stop before Vince even talks. What do you think about the brand new unicorn that Ari Emanuel is going to be in charge of?
Well, Shyster, Flywheel, and Shyster, attorneys at law. Now we know who's handling this transaction. Their Flywheel, I bet he's bragging, and he's got a right to, because they've now got a multi-tens of billions of dollar company. But I don't know. I don't know if Vince was to threaten to body slam Ari, I think Ari could fucking probably get out of that. He looks like a robust younger man, but I think the biggest thing was if Vince threatens to hold him down and dye his hair. Did Vince get Rudy Giuliani's leftover hair dye from the press conference?
I was going to say, Vince looks good. He looks really young. Let's hear some from Vince.
Let me say it another way. This is the biggest thing Ari Emanuel and Vince McMahon have ever done.
Yeah.
Combining forces like this there's nothing like this. There's never been anything like this. People have been talking about this for a long time.
He's talking about his face.
Yeah.
There's nothing like this. There's never been anything like this. People are going to be talking about this a long time. This being his face. What do you think of Vince there? I mean, obviously he seems over the moon excited about all this.
Well, again, we talked about it, that he's getting everything that he wants. He's having his cake and he's eating it too. He's getting billions of dollars for his stock. He's one of the main people running in charge of this combined company. He's given himself an employment contract, and if they leave the WWE alone, as people have said, like Endeavor leaves UFC alone, lets them operate, then he's going to be running the fucking thing. So he's doing the same thing that he was doing pretty much this time last year. Somebody just gave him an extra several $1 billion to do it.
What was Ted Turner's job title when they had the Time Warner AOL merger?
Oh, good Lord, I can't remember.
Because remember, he thought he was going to be a big muckety-muck, and he lost all of his power. Then he lost all that value to the stock.
Well, yeah, but they didn't announce that he was going to be in the initial announcement like the number 3 guy, did they?
Ted Turner? It was Jerry Levin. I mean, he was one of the top guys. It was his company being sold, but I guess the point being that...
In the new company, though.
It's not like they're going to sit next to Vince and be like, yeah, we signed to this new deal, but he ain't doing anything. We're going to kick him out the door as soon as we can.
Well, and if they do, they got to pay him.
That's true, and he has the rights to his life story, so that could be a heck of a book series. But let's go back Let's hear a little bit about some of the other suitors for WWE.
A lot of other suitors
Sure they
here.
were, but Ari, really, the synergies, everyone was very interested in us, and I appreciate that. But the synergies that Ari brings, totally different than everyone else.
So the Saudis were said to be interested.
Sure.
Liberty said
Yes.
to be interested, and others.
Yes.
And you had your pick.
Yes.
And Endeavor ends
here
up
he is.
the place.
Right.
Well, the fun thing, we've known each other for 23 years. He, when I was a young agent, said, why don't you represent us? It was an honor then. Throughout the pandemic, we got even closer. We sold the media rights. There's a lot of trust here. But I think we've built a flywheel that Vince realized the value, and what we did with UFC, he could see what we could do with his assets.
And he knew he would get a ton of money if this is the way he did the deal. And he would get everything else he wanted because we would say yes to everything.
I know, you do the voice and make fun, but Vince never used to talk like that in the short bursts where yes or no, something like that, where it sounds like he's trying to expel the stuff with what air he has in his lungs. And if he says more than 10 words in a row, then like I heard interested, he slurred it, interested. And I mean, this is the guy that used to get mad and make the announcers redo it if they said WWE instead of WWE.
He was always so controlled in everything he said. The way, he was never natural. He never felt comfortable if you ever saw him on like Letterman or Larry King or anything. He was always, sitting up tight and, I have perfect posture and here I am to tell you about WWE. That's
and
always what it was.
very practiced and very polished and, that type of stentorian tone and notwithstanding. That was one of his favorite words, notwithstanding. And now he's like, yeah, we're interested in him. I love him.
It was a winner and win.
It's concerning, especially when he looks like the fucking guy in the 60s TV commercials that used to go, yes!
I'm melting. He was never a smoker. Notoriously, Vince McMahon hated smoking, didn't want it around, was not a fan of smoking. Is this, you think, just a result of doing that voice and not just promos, but promo packages when he was an announcer and stuff?
No, that's exactly what it is. And yelling and barking instructions. And I've had some, go back and listen to me. I sound like fucking, as Paul Lee said about me one time, Mickey Mouse on amphetamines back in the 80s compared to, as you get older, naturally, your voice gets deeper. Anyway, Elton John has had to completely change, the key or the tone or goddamn, what is the note is what I'm not a musician, but he's had to change his songs that he does in concert.
No, probably the key.
Well, key or note or whatever it is that he can't hit anymore.
Note. Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, you know what I'm saying. But the point is, when you've done that for a long time, and remember they used to joke back at the WrestleMania 3, Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. That has had to have, and he's 80. But yes, I've mentioned Mick Foley damaged his vocal cords doing the squeal, and I used to try to yell when I was sick. Or, on TV tapings, we did, fucking hours and hours of TV every week. I would power through it, and over a period of time, you got scar tissue on various things. But he sounds like he's not really, it's not like just he's hoarse, he's fucking not all there.
He did take a lot of bumps after the age of 50.
There may be something to that.
Let's go back. Let's hear a little bit of audio about Ari Emanuel talking about Vince's visionary status.
And I'll just give him a little credit right here. He saw cable when nobody saw cable. And he built a national brand way back in the day when there were about 15 different promoters out there. He built an in-house sales force to sell the product that nobody had, pay-per-view, took it public. And last but not least, I think, 5-6 years ago, he went direct to consumer when none of us were thinking about direct to consumer. So us being in business with Vince, and now you're sitting there with the guy who's seen around the corner better than anybody in our space, and him being able to play with our flywheel, just look out.
This guy loves to have a flywheel, doesn't he?
Yes. Whatever robust is the Nick Khan, flywheel is the Ari Emanuel. The problem is, do you think he really believes all of that? In the, not just all time, but currently, or is he just saying these things? Because if they really think, the scary thing is, if someone were to buy WWE or take over WWE, and they think Vince is the secret to the formula. They think like there's no way WWE could exist without Vince's magic touch. That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, in some cases, the WWE would not exist today if it weren't for Vince's magic touch at some points in history.
Right. That is correct. That's not what I'm saying, though. I'm saying currently. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and also, if Vince was seeing around that many corners, he sounds like a peeping Tom, doesn't he? I don't think it's fair to say that, nobody else was seeing cable or pay-per-view when Vince did, because Crockett tried to get on was already on cable and tried to get on fucking pay-per-view, and Vince blocked him. But it's like everybody knew that would be a source of revenue for wrestling, because wrestling was still viewed as a sport, and primarily for the first, at least 10 years of pay-per-view, that's pretty much all that was on pay-per-view was sports of some kind. But I mean, I think there's a little bit of both in what you asked. I think he definitely does believe that Vince has the magic touch with this company, but I think also he's got to put the guy over that he's just put together a deal for, that he's an integral part of. It's, multi-billions of dollars. He can't, sit there and go, well, Vince has had some success, but we're going to take this thing and, moon rocket it to the stars. He's got to put Vince over some, but they've still got to be realistic that they're dealing with a guy that's almost 80 years old. Did Vince give himself a 2-year contract instead of a 5-year contract because they may have said, well, Vince, we're fixing to buy the thing, and, all due respect, but you're 78. So how about 2 years, we get to an even number there, and then we evaluate. Maybe there was something like that.
Which raises the question, why would Vince want to do this now? Why would Vince, in control of the company, want to give up controlling interest? Let's go to this.
That said, many doubted we would ever see this day, that you would ever be willing to sell a controlling stake in your company.
Right.
You are the WWE, and the WWE is you. So why?
It's the right time. It's the right time to do the right thing. And it's the next evolution of WWE. I could probably do what Ari is right now with UFC. It'd take me 10 years. By the time I would grab those 10 years, you'd be 10 years ahead again. So it's like, it makes all the sense in the world for all these synergies that we have, to extract all of the value we can out of the marketplace.
I can't help.
Let me stop it there. We'll get to the next section. What do you think of that?
It'd take him 10 years. Well, and he'd only be 88. So, he'd have plenty of time to sit back and crow about it.
Considering the WWE's merchandising machine and the way they try to capitalize on everything, should they market Vince hair dye?
No, I think he just put himself over there as saying, I could do the same thing, but it would take me a while. But boy, this is going to be much better together. But again, they're putting each other over.
Well, here's a very important question. Scott Wapner asks about the scandals. Would this sale be happening without those scandals?
But Wonder and I have to ask you, had the scandal not happened,
Right.
would we be sitting here today?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because it makes sense. Nothing's ever happened like this before. And again, I'm always looking what's best for our stockholders, what's best for the company. This is the best thing that's happened in a long, long time. All of the WrestleManias combined have been 39, including tomorrow. Does it really equal to the magnitude of what we will do together?
Did that event push you towards this day faster than you thought you'd ever be here?
No, it didn't really. In and of itself, no. But it's great that we can combine all of this news together at the same time.
What a wonderful way not to ask.
Yeah.
Why did you pay off that woman who accused you of rape?
But here's the thing. I don't believe that the scandal the unpleasantness, as they used to call World War II over across the pond, sped this up. I think the timetable has always been geared toward doing something before they had to renegotiate the TV rights and take a chance on stock value, company value, whatever, dropping if they don't get their way or don't get a renewal, don't get an increase that they'd been predicted for so long. And a lot of people were saying they wouldn't. With these people involved with them, they might get an increase now because, again, this is heavy-duty Hollywood. Everybody's interacting and intersecting. UFC's on various fucking platforms. Endeavors all over tied into Hollywood, to television, to movies. Maybe this will help them. But I think now that we can look back, when the scandal erupted independently of whatever timetable or plans Vince had to sell the thing, he probably just, okay, we can't take any bad publicity now. I'll listen to my, advisors and step back. And then either it wasn't as bad as they thought it was going to be, the publicity, or didn't last as long, or Vince just got antsy, or he said,
no, they paid everyone off. Vince did what he did with Pat Patterson. Just go home, pretend you don't work here anymore, and we'll take care of this, and you can come back and we resume everything like nothing happened.
Well, but now hold on, because that insinuates that Pat Patterson did something wrong.
Right, which he didn't, and I didn't mean to insinuate that.
So you shouldn't say it like that. But
they pretended to the public that he was suspended. That's the point.
Yes. But at the same time, Vince here thought, once he was at home, thought, I still need to be shepherding this. And he probably had all that time at home. He wasn't collecting stamps. He was talking to these people, talking to various people, and probably putting a lot of this together. And then when he decided that he had enough of his ducks in a row, that there was something going to happen, that's when he forced himself back in and said, here's what we're doing. Everybody follow, this is the way it's going to be. That, to me, is the timeline now that we can look back on.
See, the sad thing is that if a Just for Men were to contact them and say, we want to use Vince in a campaign, he couldn't effectively do it. Grumble, Just for Men. Everything's a grumble.
But Mr. McMahon might be back on television because Ari Emanuel said he ain't going to stop him, right?
Well, we'll hear a little bit from that in a little bit. But here's Ari trying to save whatever Vince tried to say in the last answer.
I was talking to him when we didn't go public the first time. He and I started talking about we should be combined, right? I've been in business with him actually for 23 years, seeing what he's done. Like I was in business with UFC for a long, long time. And so I always thought about this combination, especially with the Endeavor flywheel, that we could add on to it and what that could
flywheel.
And putting it into a new company as a pure play, there's nothing like it out there. And then I also think it shines, he gets value, which I don't think is captured presently in the WWE. We don't get, I don't think we got pure value for the UFC combined. I think the market will understand it. And I do also think for the Endeavor shareholders, they'll have a different perspective on Endeavor and the remaining assets.
All right. Does that make you feel better about the deal?
Yeah, it's completely clear now. I understand everything.
Boy, between him and Nick Khan, you've gotten your run of agents and the words they love, haven't you?
I'm so dizzy. I'm walking recklessly and attempting to fall over them talking circles around me.
But again, less Ari, let's hear a little bit more from Vince about this day, this sale, this merger, saying goodbye to being in charge of WWE.
Is this a good day for Vince McMahon and the WWE, or is it a
great day?
Is it a tough day as well?
Of my life.
This company's been in your family for 70 years. Mm-hmm. Is it a tough day?
No, it's a great day. Things have to evolve. Family, business, it all has to evolve for all the right reasons. And this is the right business decision. Thus far, it's the right family decision.
What I thought was interesting, Ari, is that Vince is going to be the executive chairman of the new company.
Right.
That implies that he is going to have a say.
Well, I would have said the following. I would have body slammed him if he thought he was going to leave. Because as I said to you before, here's a man who has seen around the corners at every beat over the last 40 years of this business and has a vision for where this business, way before a lot of people see it. Him now being able to utilize what we have built in our flywheel, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Because I got Vince McMahon, a visionary that sees around corners. I got Dana White and what we've built. That's pretty unstoppable.
So you want.
What do you think of that?
Flywheel.
Flywheel. Haven't heard that word like ever, and I've heard it like 6 times in the last 2 minutes. Let's now.
He's got a fascination. Look at the flywheel. Look at the pretty flywheel. Don't pay attention to what we're doing over here.
Well, Jim, on the topic of Vince staying.
Yeah, here's what I want to hear.
Well, did he have to be convinced? Let's go to this.
Wanted him to stay.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God.
Did he have to convince you to stay?
Not that much.
Would you have been content?
I love what I do. I've loved building WWE all my life. It's my passion. And to have an opportunity to have it grow like this, an exponential standpoint, is like, can't beat better than that.
It's an interesting plot twist. Because not a lot of people saw this coming. In fact, your own CEO, Nick Khan, told our David Faber just back in February, quote, Vince has declared to the board, to me, to other upper management, he is 100% open to a transaction where he's not included in the company moving forward.
Sure.
You were ready to walk away?
Absolutely.
I wasn't going to let him.
Let me stop it right there. When he said absolutely, he shook his head no.
He shook his head no.
Well, let me get your thoughts on some of this here. What do you think of the idea that Vince ever was going to go? Because I always said that was my issue. As long as he had actual control of the company, he was never going to step aside from anything. And we have heard the reports from Raw of him taking over the show. It's his show again. The idea that Vince was ever going to leave as part of the sale, that was the thing I always said, why I thought the Saudis were going to get it. Because they'll give it to Vince. They'll let him do whatever he wants. And that's exactly what he got here.
I think if it came down to nut cutting time, as they say, and Vince had an offer from a company for $7 or $8 or $9 billion or whatever that he wanted for the thing, and they said, but Vince, you're almost 80. We'll give you a nice, obviously, package and the stock and all the blah, blah, blah. But I think he would have been open to that, but he would have probably, and obviously did, do more talking and more convincing to people who were willing to do the deal and keep him. And he got that. I think what I'm saying is, yes, that was always his goal. We've always said he never wanted to quit, never wanted to retire, never wanted to step down, whatever. But if it came the situation where the only way he could sell the company and get those billions of dollars was in effect letting it go, I think he would have done that. But he had another option and he took that one. I'm not saying if he had 2 options, he wouldn't have taken less money and stay in charge, but this way he didn't have to worry about that.
But again, to go the other way, if you are an outsider whose knowledge of wrestling may not be what yours is, let's say, and you think Vince is the secret touch, Vince's formula is what always works, would you want to buy WWE if you didn't get Vince as part of the deal?
For that much money, wouldn't you be doing due diligence to, basically hear all sides of it? And there would be a lot of people saying, oh God, the guys are much happier that Vince is not in charge of creative and this and that and the other thing. And it doesn't sound like any of those people ever bother to dig deeply into the inner workings of wrestling. And that fucking moron that bought the USWA from Jerry Lawler and Larry Burton after Jerry Jarrett sold his piece. They came in the court case. They came and finally contacted Jerry Jarrett. And, we're trying to get him to provide him some information or whatever. And he said, let me ask you this. He said, you paid $1 million or whatever it was for this fucking company, and you just now have heard my name and don't know anything about the company before you purchased it or who was in charge of it or who led it to success or whatever the fuck. What kind of diligence at all did you do, much less the do part? He said, I have no sympathy for you. You're an idiot. So if you spend a lot of money for something and don't bother to dig real deep into all sides of the issue, then How smart are you?
Well, let's go to the value of WWE.
Vision about where the business is and where it's going.
The deal values UFC, you mentioned some numbers, $12 billion and WWE at $9.3 billion. That's a big number.
Well, here's
WWE's market cap is 6.5.
Here's what I would say to you is exactly why we did this, because I think we weren't getting the pure value. I don't think the WWE was getting the pure value. Combined, it's rarefied air, the two of us. And I think the analysts will be able to do it. It's good for the shareholders of WWE and for the shareholders of Endeavor. And then when you look back, I don't believe that the Endeavor shareholders were getting pure play for the rest of the asset that we had. And I think for the first time, you now have the ability to do that in both situations.
You don't think the WWE investors are getting their value at a $6.1 billion market cap?
And remember when we dissected their finances, a lot of that comes from the rights fees, which are, again, due for renewal fairly soon. So I don't know.
Well, we heard that number before, $9 billion. Let's go to this.
And that's a win-win, which is what Vince and I have always talked about.
When I throw those kind of numbers out to you, I mean, the word on the street was that you wanted $9 billion. Mm-hmm. This values the WWE at 9.3.
Right.
So despite everything that's happened...
I'm a visionary.
Well, you hit...
Yes. Deservedly so.
But here's what I would also say to you. We paid a fair price, and I'll tell you why. We paid a little bit for control premium. With our cost cuts, their new deals coming up, which is right now, and our...
Let me stop it right there. Our cost cuts. You know, that's not...
he's over my head here.
Yeah, well, that's not defined in any way. Does that mean cost cuts from redundancies, like job layoffs from this? Or is that something else?
That's a good question.
Cost savings.
Let's see if he answers it.
We can extract from the business right now and grow the business with all of our levers, whether it be international sales, domestic, sponsorship, gambling, all the things that we do. I think it's right. I would also say to you is, when I bought IMG, everybody said I overpaid. It was actually one of the cheapest deals in sports. For sure, when I bought the UFC, everybody was like at $4.2 billion. They were like crazy. We've tripled the EBITDA in that period of time. And now with this is going to be UFC 2.0 as it relates to all the things in the flywheel that we can bring to them. And we have unbelievably attractive economics. The balance sheet's incredible. Our
you ought to see him in a bikini.
Less than 3 times. Our free cash.
See, the other thing, too, is remember, this is an interview on CNBC. This is not an interview for fans. This is an interview for investors. So this is an interview for people who may want to put money into this new public company that forms. So anything Ari Emanuel says here is to project exactly what they want.
Should be taken with a grain of salt.
Not necessarily, but he's saying it directly. The audience are the investors, not anyone else. It's just about the investors.
Right.
So conversion is unbelievable. So I think when people look at this business on a combined basis and also look at the remaining assets, for both shareholders, it's incredible.
Are you still as committed to deleveraging as you've told Wall Street that you are? You said at a conference about a month ago, we've taken the company from 8 times levered to 4 times. I'd sleep a lot more if we got it lower. You still committed to that?
Well, right now in the new company, we will be at, I want to make sure I say it, below 3, and at Endeavor, we'll be below 3 also times. So I think we're doing our job there.
I don't even know what that fucking means.
All right, well, let's go. Why didn't Wall Street see this coming?
Why didn't Wall Street see this coming?
I read
analyst notes which said, Deutsche Bank, we believe a WWE acquisition's off the table at this point. They thought maybe you were going to go in a different direction. What did Wall Street miss?
Everything. You know, listen, I don't think people realize, one, that Vince saw what we built with the UFC. He knows what he wants to do with the WWE and take it to the next level. We had long conversations about it. We think this is right for both groups. I think they just missed the value proposition and the flywheel effect on both of the companies.
What happens if you guys disagree? Executive Chairman McMahon says, I think we should be doing this. CEO Emanuel says, no, I think we should be doing this, and this is my show. What happens?
Well, what happens there is we have a little contest in the ring.
Some people are going to say he's not joking.
All right, okay. I outweigh Ari by 100 pounds. So I think that's the answer.
Hey, let me ask you, though. Beyond the voice, and I don't know how you would describe it, the grunting, out-of-breath way of speaking, Vince has always said about himself that he was somewhat socially awkward. Like, if he wasn't around his people, if there was a function, Linda was the social one. Vince would rather hang out by the bar and talk to the bartender, according to Vince. The behavior, the way of speaking, do you think any of that is here? That he's in a situation he doesn't like? He's not in control. An awkward situation of being interviewed? Do you think that's where we see some of this come out, or is this something else?
No, I think that was what we saw come out with Bob Costas, or, some of those other more headline-grabbing interviews he did when he was going into something like that to be confrontational, because he was defensive, because he did have something to hide, or he did have something he didn't want to talk about, or he did have a chip on his shoulder. Here, I think whatever's happened to him, he's being as pleasant as Vince normally, is in small talk. Because Vince doesn't do small talk.
Well, let's hear about the future plans in terms of creative, which is funny now that we're watching Monday Night Raw play out. Let's go to this.
Seriously, what happens if you guys disagree?
Here's what we said, right? And I said it to him. If we disagree on something that we want to do, guess what? We're not doing it. It's the relationship I have with Silver Lake. I would never put that, and it's the relationship I have with Dana. Dana's got the say as it relates to the UFC. Vince, as it relates to the WWE, he's going to have that. He's going to have the say. We have nothing to do with the creative process. That's Vince's and that's Dana's situation. All the back stuff, we're going to try and do what we do. I think that's what he wants. But if there's a disagreement, that's called a relationship. We will work it out, and that's how we have it.
Let me make it clear. I thought you worked for me.
On the creative side, Vince, do you plan to be as involved as you have in the past on the creative side?
Yes and no. On a higher level, yes. In the weeds, which I always love to get in the weeds in the past, no, can't do that.
All right.
That's one of his favorite phrases. I'm not going to get in the weeds, which is basically, I'm just going to tell everybody what I want to happen and let them figure out the details, even though it doesn't make sense.
If you had a lineup in front of you, you had to pick which guy was just in the weeds. Wouldn't you point to him the way he looks right now? That guy's clearly in the weeds.
I would say he's into weed.
Well, what do you think of the idea that Ari Emanuel, Endeavor, based on what he's saying here, it's we acquire you, we set everything up, you run the creative, we'll take care of the back end. What do you think of that? If that's true, they don't get involved with creative. That's like the perfect setup to have a $1 billion owner who's not going to get involved in creative.
Yeah.
And two, when you hear that they won't get involved, and let me ask you that first. What do you think about the idea that they won't get involved?
Well, obviously that's good, because say what you want about Vince or anybody else, it's always better in the long run if at least the people involved are wrestling people instead of you remember what happened with TBS in the 80s. Remember what's happened anytime a non-wrestling affiliated or experienced corporate entity gets involved in wrestling, it's never good. Having said that, I think in a lot of cases, because he mentioned the same thing and the same term creative talking about Dana White. And obviously they don't have bookers and writers that script their matches or their television programs or whatever. He's talking about in this creative, I think the use that Ari Emanuel is making is more broad in terms of however the product is produced, whether the product is professional football or mixed martial arts or pro wrestling. We're not going to get involved with the company in actually producing that product. We're going to try to use our contacts and influence to get that product seen in more places and purchased by more people. I think he uses creative as broad.
You're saying contacts and stuff. I'm talking more about if you work in marketing, if you work in PR, whatever it may be, do you have to worry about your job right now at WWE?
Oh, yeah. No, that's two different things. What I was saying first off is I don't think that even Ari Emanuel there is saying that, Vince is going to start booking at least, Raw and writing the format. He's talking about Vince is running the company. He's creating the content. He's producing the product, and we're going to market it and sell it. Now, again, there's got to be at some point, I don't think they're just going to come in there with a fucking hatchet and drop everybody before they've evaluated everything. But at some point, they're going to realize that, we probably don't need, a separate catering for each company that we own. We could do it all together, or accounting, or some other business department. That may very well happen. But I would think they would wait to see how things are operating first before they just decide to change everything.
Well, speaking of creative, what's the future creative plans for the Mr. McMahon character?
What happens if Vince says, you know what? Mr. McMahon, the character,
Mr.
decides he wants to get back into the ring. You let him?
His choice.
Purely his choice.
Purely.
That's not going to happen.
Famous
Okay.
last
All right.
words.
Okay. All right.
Famous last words.
77.
I know we're
That's not going to happen, but anything could happen in the WWE.
He was 76 last year in Dallas, wasn't he?
To the question we had the other day about older people getting in the ring, like Shane just got hurt, although Shane's not an older guy. He's only 53, but he's not a trained wrestler. Or at least
for a professional athlete, that's in the upper echelon of older fellas.
What do you think of Ari Emanuel saying that if a 77-year-old wants to get in the ring, it's his choice?
Well,
Or
first
it's
of all,
WWE's choice if they want to put an older guy in the ring.
again, I think Ari Emanuel is talking about if he's seeing in his head Mr. McMahon, the boss, the guy that came out and said you're fired to people. I don't think that if you sat down and said, hey, Ari, Vince has an idea where he's going to have a match with Steve Austin. They're going to get double juice and the finish is going to be a splash on a fucking garbage can. Then I think Ari would know, Vince, now this company that you are the number 2 or 3 guy in is worth $20 billion and we don't need you goddamn scrambling your brains worse than already scrambled. I think he's talking about he would let it go if the Mr. McMahon character wanted to come back. Well, he's not going to say he wouldn't with Vince sitting right there next to him. They probably discussed it. And I would think he probably has some reasonable expectation that Vince is not going to want to become a television performer again because of the voice and the look and the fact that he probably needs to sleep by 8 o'clock every night now. So again, I wouldn't be panicked by that. I don't think Vince is going to have any more matches. I don't think they're going to allow that to go on. I've said before, I think that the new company, just as a liability issue, may crack down on older guys who are either retired or only working part-time or have had health issues in the past, not risk themselves again. But I do believe that if Vince said he wanted to come out and cut a promo as Mr. McMahon, that they'd probably not have a problem with it because Ari Emanuel's view is that, well, he's one of the great characters in the history of the company.
Although people would probably have a tough time understanding it. A few more clips and we'll wrap things up.
But then that has to creep in. It's got to be like, well, geez, Vince, do you think you're up for it? But go ahead.
The TV rights package is something we've talked a lot about. Let's hear about that.
We're coming, towards the end of our time, but the TV rights.
Yeah.
Where are we in the stage of renegotiating that, given where the economy is, given some of the concerns about the escalation in rights fees? How optimistic are you in renegotiating those fees?
Well, the rights fees are now coming up. Here's what I would say to you is,
Have you started the talks yet?
no, they have not started the talks yet. Here's what I would say to you is, the number one show in cable is Raw, 1.8 million viewers, up 9% from the same period of time, 2022 to 2023. Even though everybody says cable's dying, Raw is up. SmackDown, I think it's 2.3 million viewers, up 7%, same period. And the unbelievable thing is the 18 to 49 demographic is the best in the business.
What changed between a year ago or so and now? What was taken out of creative that would have caused more people to watch more WWE, 7% more, than last year? I don't know what it could be.
And the rate card is way below market by a significant amount. So when you think about those things, and in my opinion, and Vince and I talk about this, content's king. There's linear players, there's cable players, there's the SVOD players. Everybody wants the young demographic, the social. I mean, we're across the board, male, female, young, old, both assets. I think they're going to get a proper price.
And
Let me stop you there. What do you think about that? Would you hire this guy represent you?
Well, that's the thing is now they're going to have muscle. The one thing that has been talked about when the rights fees were being discussed originally was that wrestling always has, and even with Vince's efforts to not call it wrestling, it doesn't get the sponsor dollars that an equivalent audience of a more prestigious program does. And that may have been true in the old days with, local TV, and it's a lower income audience watching in a lot of the markets or whatever. But now this is obviously people that have the wherewithal to travel to shows, spend money on stuff, and they're going to, Endeavor being they, is going to strong arm, the fucking proper rates out of a lot of these advertisers, it seems like. So that's the example of the Hollywood muscle.
the idea here is there's nothing like the two combined. It's live. That's really a key, because our events are live. People want to watch live.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we are a success and continue to be a success and can fit in every medium, we can fit everywhere. And in terms of social media and everything else, we fit everywhere.
WWE, we fit everywhere. Well, Jim, this is towards the end here. Scott Wapner wants to talk to Vince about his legacy and everything that's happened in the last year. Let's go to this.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you specifically about how you think about your legacy, given where you took this company, what's happened in the last year, the regrets you may have as a result of all that, and how you think your legacy will and your story will be told.
Well, let me just say that I've made mistakes, obviously, both personally and professionally through my 50-year career. I've owned up to every single one of them and then moved on. I'm not sure, the legacy stuff, I'm not going to write it. So I don't know. I want to say it's someone who had an extraordinary amount of fun, great passion for what they did, and wound up doing the biggest deal he's ever done in his life.
It sounds like an old guy who's just so proud of what he just did.
Yeah. And this is the crowning achievement. This is the big one. He didn't want to be Orson Welles and start out big and then trail off. He wanted to go out with a bang. That's how you got to top this.
Well, let's go out with a bang, Jim, following up on something you and I talked about, Vince's new contract where he gets his intellectual property.
You say you're not going to write your legacy, but you did make that deal that you get a multi-million-dollar payout if the company gets sold, and you control your IP. So in a sense, you are going to write your legacy.
How about that? I just did. You wrote it for me.
What about that deal? People thought that was rather peculiar.
Which deal?
About getting the payout if the company gets sold, and then also owning the rights to your intellectual property so that you can tell your story if you want to.
It is what it is.
But let me just say my opinion.
Let me stop it there. Vince, that's all Vince will say. It is what it is, because the other way of saying it is, I just decided I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. He said he wasn't going to write his legacy. He's just now got the contractual ability to determine who does write it.
Well, let's hear Ari Emanuel try to save this here at the end.
Because we talked about this, I think that's fair. It is his legacy. He's the one, we're coming together. He's the one that should control his legacy. It shouldn't be controlled by somebody else. and that's actually fair. A legacy, he's built 50 years. It shouldn't be held by anybody else. It should be held by him. That's the right thing to do.
When do we get a name for the new company?
We're working on it now, actually.
Very soon.
Very soon.
And when do you expect it to go public, as you say, on the New York Stock Exchange?
Hopefully in the next 4 to 6 months. So, depending on the government.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate it very much.
It's good.
You should call the new company Grumble. That's all Vince does.
Let's get ready to grumble.
Yes,
Actually, I think they ought to buy the Outdoor Life Network, and then they could start producing porn, and the new company could be called Fightin', Fishin', and Fucking.
I don't think it's going to be that. You know, the thing with Vince, it's almost like he's trying to whisper, but he can't. Like, he's not raising his voice. Like, and the thing is, I just want to. Like, he's whispering the words, and they're coming out like that.
I don't know. I'm still potentially thinking that he's been replaced by an animatronic figure. We'll find out in the coming weeks.
Jim, we're going to wrap up the show in a minute, but closing thoughts about this CNBC interview with not just Vince, but the man who's really now in charge of all this, Ari Emanuel.
Well, again, you know, a lot of happy talk and et cetera, and we don't know the things that we don't know yet about how this is all going to come together and affect everybody, but it is even though Vince is still in charge of the WWE, somebody else is in charge of the big picture. And it'll be the first time in 41 years that Vince is not in charge of the biggest wrestling promotion in the world. And it's going to be the first time in what I think almost 70 years that a McMahon's not in charge. And, you know, the thing is, wrestling today currently pro wrestling has never been less popular in terms of number of people watching or number of people going to see it live or numbers of wrestlers actually making a consistent living at it. But the company that runs the biggest company, or the entity that runs the biggest company, is worth more than any wrestling promotion now ever has been, ever before, ever. And the people that are left watching it spend more money per head than any wrestling fan group ever, anywhere. So I guess there's good and bad in there, and I'm not sure which outweighs what.